NeoGraft is a hair transplantation technique that we've introduced at Salmon Creek Plastic Surgery around the beginning of 2011. And it's a way of doing hair transplantation where the harvesting of the hair follicles that are being transplanted is not quite automated, but is much more efficient than it used to be. Traditionally, hair transplantation was done by removing a strip of scalp from the back of the person's head, and then under the microscope dividing that up into all the little individual hair follicles. And that division was done manually under the microscope. Now, with the NeoGraft machine, we're able to harvest those hair follicles mechanically, protecting the hair follicles and making the procedure much more efficient and much quicker, actually. So really what's different about the NeoGraft is the way the hair follicles are harvested and the fact that there's no scar on the back of the scalp. This also allows patients to resume their normal activities much faster because there's no sutures, there's no bandages after 24 hours, and it becomes much more convenient for the patient as far as their lifestyle is concerned. And I like to explain to patients that it's not too different than moving tulip bulbs from one side of your yard to another. If you have a lot of tulip bulbs in the backyard and you want to get them to the front yard, you just dig up the tulip bulbs and then you're going to put them where you want them in the front yard. And that's sort of what we're doing here. We're removing the hair follicles from the back of the scalp and we're moving it to either the top of the scalp or to the front, wherever the patient wishes to have them placed. After the procedure is over, most patients are surprised at how easy the procedure itself actually was. They don't complain of pain afterwards, and they really feel like over the ensuing several days that they can get back to their activities much more easily than they would have expected. So we've had really good luck with this newer technique, and the patients especially appreciate not having a big scar and a wound to take care of on the back of their scalp. A lot of times patients are wondering where the hair comes from. You know, when you're having hair transplantation, where is the hair coming from that you're actually having transplanted? And it turns out that it's your own hair that's being used. You can't use anyone else's hair. It has to be from your head. So there has to be enough hair on typically the back of your scalp to move to the front. So the NeoGraft procedure is done in our operating room, and the scalp where the hair is being harvested from is anesthetized using local anesthetic, just like the dentist would do. The NeoGraft machine itself is then used to harvest the individual hair follicles. Once the hair follicles are harvested, the patient is then anesthetized once again, say on the front of his or her scalp or on the top in the location where the hair is going to be placed. Little tiny nicks are made in the skin, and then the hair follicles are placed into those little tiny nicks in the skin, and that's the procedure. Now, a typical patient might have 1,000 to anywhere up to 2,000 hair follicles individually transplanted, so it does take some time to do that. And in fact, it's not unusual that the patient might spend 6 to 8 hours here for a hair transplantation procedure. After the procedure, the patients will have a bandage on the back of their head where the hair was taken from for about 24 hours. There is no bandage that goes on the location where the hair is placed, and patients will find that they will be swollen in that area for several days after surgery. We might have some bruising as well, although that's less common. We have to be very careful in explaining to the patients that it's important not to disrupt the hair follicles. They're not sewn in, there's nothing holding them in place, and so eventually the hair follicles will stabilize by new blood vessels growing into them. That takes about 48 to 72 hours to happen. So the patients are very careful for the first few days not to disrupt the hair follicles. And in fact, we don't have patients get shower water directly on their scalp for about 1 week after surgery. After about 10 days or so, it's very difficult to see where the hair follicles were placed, and so most patients will be back at their routine activities within 7 to 10 days after surgery. Patients will see a visible difference in the hair immediately after the procedure and for the next several weeks. The hair follicles that are transplanted will be growing for several weeks. At that point, it's pretty typical that the hair shafts, or at least most of the hair shafts that have been transplanted, will shed, just like we shed our hair normally. And the reason that happens is because the follicles go into a dormant phase. They sort of go to sleep, if you will. Then between 3 months and 6 months after the transplantation procedure, the hair follicles will start to grow again. And so somewhere between 9 and 12 months, the patients will have normal hair growth from the transplanted hair follicles. One of the interesting things about our practice is that about 40 to 50% of patients, depending on the month, are women. When women have hair transplantation, it's quite possible that over time those transplanted grafts may start to thin themselves. Transplanted grafts in men tend to be more stable over time. In other words, somebody might have hair loss in the front, or they might have hair loss on the top of their head, but it tends not to be as continually progressive as hair loss in women happens to be. And that is something that patients have to be aware of. The nice thing about the NeoGraft hair transplantation technique is that it's fairly straightforward and it's something you can control. There is a lot of things in life that we can't control, and it's been really wonderful to have this new technology to allow patients to work on something that has bothered them for a long time or that they anticipate bothering them more in the future. They've been really pleased with the results that they've seen over the last couple of years with the NeoGraft hair transplantation technique.